Hello, I'm Owen Ralph from Greenwoodside, and in this video I want to talk about using analytics to improve your social media activity. Now, if data and maths in general isn't something that you find particularly interesting or take any pleasure in at all, social media insights and analytics can all seem a bit of a daunting prospect, a bit of a boring prospect, and you might run away from it as fast as you possibly can. Because there are just so many numbers and graphs that you get, particularly in Facebook, which is what I'm going to focus on here. There are just pages and pages and pages of numbers and line graphs and things, and it can be quite hard to know where to start. And they don't really look like they mean much in isolation. And honestly, in isolation, they don't. And that is the important thing. So how are they useful then? Well, firstly, they allow you to initiate an iterative process when doing your social media activity of creating, measuring, and changing. So firstly, you put something out there, you see how well it does, and then you make changes based on what worked and what didn't, and then you start again. And that iterative process is the cornerstone these days of digital marketing. And so then how do you make the numbers make sense? So as I said, you do not use the numbers in isolation because they're fairly meaningless. The important thing is to use them to make comparisons. And you make comparisons across two dimensions, I'm going to say, space and time. Let me explain. So when I say comparing across space, I mean comparing different posts or different pages, basically comparing different social objects which are of the same type and seeing which one has the better numbers and which one had the better performance. And then when I say comparing across time, what I'm referring to is looking at a single trend or a single object and just seeing how its numbers and performance have changed over time. So then, let's dive into some specific numbers which you should be looking at. Firstly, you need to compare your page's performance to other pages. And Facebook has a specific tool which allows you to do that, which you should definitely be using. What it does is it allows you to choose 4 or 5 other pages who are kind of similar to your page and whose activity you want to track. So first thing to do is identify those. What I would recommend is, so choose probably musicians who are doing a similar thing to what you are doing so that you're kind of comparable, but don't just necessarily go with musicians whose music sounds similar to yours or whose music you particularly like. Go with musicians whose social media activity seems to be pretty good, who are appearing in your newsfeed on a regular basis, and who seem to be getting a lot of engagement. So who basically seem to be doing all the things right, and all the things that you should be emulating. Then once you've chosen those pages, you will end up with a chart which allows you to compare a few things, which I'll just run through now. You can compare total page likes, which actually isn't hugely important. You can compare pages with different size audiences, that's fine, but it's a useful bit of context for the following numbers. And next there's audience growth, which is much easier to compare directly and is much important. And this is the percentage increase. So you look at the total number of likes you had last week, you look at the total number of likes you have this week, and see what percentage of last week has increased from this week. And then you can see the number of times that the page has posted. And this will give you an idea of how often that you should be posting when you see how often other people are posting, but also how much engagement those posts are getting. And then finally, yes, it's engagement. How many times their posts have been reacted to or commented on or shared over the past week. So do start off by creating that chart and see how your activity compares to other people. And that will give you a sense of how well you're doing in the context of the broader market, and also how you might need to change. Second thing to look at, when it comes to posts on Facebook and on other channels, keep an eye on the reach of those posts. And you can find a chart for this just above that page comparison chart we were just talking about in the last tip. That's within the Facebook dashboard. So just to define a couple of terms that you're going to see in this kind of area. So reach is the number of unique people that a particular post or a particular page, whatever the context is, has reached in a given time frame. So it's the unique people. Impressions is another one which you might see in similar places, and I think Twitter tends to use impressions more than reach. as does Instagram, I believe. Impressions is the total number of times that your post has been seen by anyone, regardless of whether they've seen it before. So if a person sees your post twice, then that counts for 2 impressions, but only 1 person reached. That's the difference between those 2 numbers. Reach is more important than engagement, which is the other number that you'll see in that chart. And there are 2 reasons for this. Firstly, because a high reach normally tends to be influenced by a high engagement. So when you see an abnormally high reach, you can generally infer from that you've had a lot of engagement, and it kind of rolls it into one place rather than having to compare lots of different numbers. But secondly, because the reach tells you how many chances you've had to bring someone new into your audience. And really one of the core points of doing social media as an artist is to gain as many opportunities as you can to bring new people into your audience. So when you have a high reach, then you're clearly doing something right. You're clearly getting yourself out there as much as you possibly can. So keep an eye on the reach. Think about, for the good posts, what factors might have meant that they did well, and then look at the bad posts and think about what factors might have meant they did badly, and then try again in that iterative process and try and replicate the success of the ones that did well. So next, when it comes to videos, you can compare 3-second views and 1-minute views. Now initially it might seem irritating that Facebook's analytics splits out video views into 3-second views and 1-minute views rather than just giving you views. So you might just want that single number to know how many people have seen it. But that single number is counterintuitively problematic and doesn't really give the whole story. You might remember that there was a whole controversy a few years back about how Facebook was counting its views, and that presumably is the reason that you've now got these 2 different numbers. So to explain the point, the 3-second views are, what it says on the tin is the number of times your video has been viewed by anyone for at least 3 seconds. So anyone who's seen it for 3 seconds, 4 seconds, a minute, 4 minutes, 40 minutes, they will all count within your 3-second views. And then 1-minute views is the same thing, but it's everyone who's seen it for a minute or more. So all of those people will have been included in the 3-second views. But the important thing is you've got that smaller number then to let you know how many people made it to the 1-minute mark. And this comparison gives you a basic insight into what's known as viewer retention, which is how long it takes people to get bored, basically. And you can look at this mapped out in more detail in a graph within Facebook Creator Studio if you want to. But just seeing those 2 numbers gives you enough of an indication of whether your content has been engaging enough to keep people hooked until at least 1 minute through. So a good thing to do is compare your videos that you put out recently and look at the level of drop-off between the 3-second views and the 1-minute views. And look at the ones which haven't had that much drop-off, and those are the ones that have done well, and think about why they might have done well. Then look at the ones where the 3-second views are hugely more than the 1-minute views, which might be really small, and think about why people might have got bored. Did you talk for too long at the beginning, basically, is a common one. Or what other factors might have meant people didn't stick around for more than a few seconds. And finally, keep an eye on your page likes. So growth in your page likes, your page audience, really is a seal of approval that your content is doing well and is getting people's approval, is bringing them in, they want to see more from you. Generally, when your likes are growing, it's because either people have come from another source, they might have kind of heard you at a gig and then sought you out on Facebook, so they wanted to follow you that way. Or it might be that your content has been reaching them in their feed. It might have been liked by a friend and then they saw it and they enjoyed it and they wanted to see more. That's good. That is the whole point. That is the holy grail, that your audience grows that way. If it's not going up that fast, then consider what changes you might want to make in the earlier points that might sort of improve your reach and improve the amount of engagement you're getting. An alternative is you might want to run a paid audience growth campaign, which I've discussed in another video in this series, so I won't go into that now, but that might be something to consider if you don't think that your audience is really growing fast enough. So there we go, that's a few numbers that you should be keeping an eye on. Remember that even though this stuff isn't really that fun, you may not find it that interesting unless you're a massive nerd like me, it's a vital element in that loop of improving your content, of creating, measuring, and changing. So do take the time to take a look at those numbers occasionally. If you want any more detail on any of this, or you need any help kind of getting to grips with the numbers, drop me an email at my email address below, and good luck.